so excited today. Winter's settling in. In fact, we're about to have our first major, huge snowstorm of the season. I don't know about you, but when I think of snowstorms, I think about making something that's going to take a couple of hours on my stove, be hearty. I'm going to have it to eat it all day. I'm snowed in. I've got food for a day or two. This really excites me. Stews, roasts, soups. Today, what I thought we'd do is we do a really nice hearty mushroom soup. So let's take a look at what we're putting in our soup. We've got some onions, some beautiful parsley, some garlic, which, by the way, happens to be from my friend Freya's garden. So this is very special garlic. Some celery, and of course the main star of the show, our mushrooms. And we're using two kinds of mushrooms today. I'm going to use a white mushroom, but I'm also going to use a cremini mushroom. I like cremini mushrooms because they add a slightly heartier, more woodsy flavor in combination with the white mushroom. It just adds a certain richness and depth to the soup. Also, just so you know, cremini mushrooms are also, they're baby portobellos. They're often called baby bellas. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to saute in my pan some onions, some garlic, and some celery. This is going to be the holy trinity of our soup today. I'm going to use a nice sized onion. Onion's going to give a great amount of flavor to this. And we're going to chop this up pretty fine. And basically, I'm pretty simple about my onions. My main goal when I do onions, honestly, not to cut my hand off. So here we go. This is my technique. This is the technique I learned from my dad. I'm going to basically do like a little cross section on the top of my onion, angling my knife down like that, turn it a quarter turn. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to turn it on its side, and I'm just going to slice away, and I got an instant nice dice. This little piece at the end that I got, just do a quick rough chop. Now one thing nice about this soup, this is a pureed soup. That means that when we're all done with this, we're going to whack it with a hand blender, so it doesn't really matter how big or small my pieces are. The main thing is just to get them in so they cook evenly. Let's turn the flame on here. Now what I like to do is I'll use, to saute up my celery and my onions, I'm going to use an extra virgin olive oil. And on top of that, to make it extra special, I'm going to stick in a nice piece of butter. The butter is going to give it a huge amount of flavor, but because we have olive oil in there, it's going to keep it from burning. So let's throw the onions in there. Can you hear that? That's the sound that we want to hear, that sizzle. Give that a little shake. And I'm going to add a piece of garlic. I'm going to take one of Freya's cloves, give it a good smash. Smashing the garlic, I can literally just pull the skin right off. How easy is that? I'm going to give it just a big rough chop because again, this is all going to be pureed at the end. And then I'm going to take 3 stalks of celery. Now many people throw away or discard the part of the celery that's leafy. If I was eating celery with peanut butter or cream cheese, I don't necessarily want a big bite full of this, but it's got a huge amount of flavor. So in this case, this is what I want most. So let's give this a nice rough chop. And once my onions turn translucent, in about a minute and a half, I'm going to add the celery to it. And you can see it's starting to get a nice glaze on it, and that's what we're looking for. And every time you add a particular food in the beginning, what you do is you're layering your dish. By layering this soup, we make it just that much more flavorful. And that's why usually we'll start with an onion and a garlic and a celery. Oftentimes if I'm making a soup, I'll use carrots. But this soup is a very savory soup. The onions are kind of sweet, so I don't want to add any more sweetness, so I'm not going to add the carrots. All right, I hear my onions calling to me. I can look at them. I can see that they're beautifully translucent. Let me add my celery. And then I can turn my attention to the main star of the show, the mushrooms. Give this a nice stir. Oh, you should be able to, you should smell this. Amazing. Let me add a little salt. Hold it. Slow down. Go. Let me add some salt and some pepper, some cracked black pepper. And I'm going to add one other thing, and this is a signature thing for me. I like my food to have a little bit of a kick to it, depending on what I'm making. So I'm going to add just a little bit of crushed chilies. Just a little sprinkle of crushed chili peppers. You can add just a little bit of heat, especially on a nice cold day. Nice little heat, but it's not going to change the flavor. And besides, I'm sort of famous for this. If you ask most of my friends or people who come over or I cook for, they'll say, yeah, Evan's food tends to have a little bit of kick to it. Yep, that's me. I can't explain it, but I love it. All right, so this is coming along really nicely. By the way, this is really the only time I'm going to salt this soup until we're completely done with it. And the reason is this. If you salt soups and stews often during the process, you can't taste the salt, but it adds a huge amount of sodium to your food. Not something that I really want. I'm salting now because I want to sweat out these vegetables. All right. Mushrooms. While that's cooking in there, let's talk about the mushrooms. Two kinds of mushrooms I mentioned earlier. We have a cremini mushroom, which is actually a baby portobello mushroom, also called baby bellas. These add a nice richness to the soup. White mushrooms, wonderful. By the way, when you're choosing a white mushroom, what you want to look for is a mushroom that's really all white. You don't want to see any brown on it. And on the inside here, you want to see this all closed and connected. You don't want to see any of the dark ribs in there. So these are really nice mushrooms. All right, let's cut these up. And again, we're pureeing the soup, so it's not important that these be uniform. The important thing is that they all cook evenly. We're just going to cut a bunch of these up, and again, this is the main ingredient. This is going to give us our main flavor for our soup. And I don't know about you, but I love mushrooms. Ever since I was a kid, anytime I was at a party and someone passed a tray of stuffed mushrooms, that would be it. And this is a nice soup, by the way. Sometimes when I make the soup, I invite some of my friends over. They go crazy about it. They think it's complicated and takes a long time, but it's actually very, very simple, as you will see. All right, so we got our mushrooms. And we're going to just chop up a couple more. Excellent. Let's give this a final stir. And you can see in here that everything's turning a nice translucent color. That tells me that we're really ready to start adding the mushrooms. Okay. Into the pot we're going to put our mushrooms. And this is going to make about 4 or 5 quarts of soup. That's enough for me for the weekend, but I'll share if I have anyone come over, so don't worry. We're going to give this a nice stir. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add our liquids. I like to add a combination of stock and water. You can make your own stocks. I find that by using stock and water, your soup ends up much more flavorful. There's a much richer taste to it. It's just all around much better to do that. For this soup, I'm going to use a chicken stock. Now, you can make your own chicken stock. Easy to do. But we're living in a time where you can pick up a box or a can of an organic chicken stock. That's just as good as if you made it yourself, and that's what I'm doing. We grab a thing of stock out of my cabinet. Go, we have a box of chicken stock, and I love this. It's free range, it's organic. I couldn't make a better stock than this myself if I wanted to. This is coming along nicely. You can see the steam pouring off it. Oh, the smell is amazing. All right, and into this, I'm just going to cover this for 1 minute. Let this cook a little bit faster, and let's let some of the moisture go back into the soup here. We're just going to throw a cover on that. Time for a wine break, for a sip. You can see the steam pouring out. I covered this because just for a couple of minutes, I want all the flavor and the moisture and steam that's in the pot right now to go back into the soup. You can see the steam pouring out. I'm going to take this out. Now we're at the point where I'm going to start to add my liquids. And this becomes the body of the soup. I'm going to add half chicken stock and half water. So what I'm going to do, now I've chosen to use a nice organic free-range chicken stock. I get it at the local market. I'm going to add a quart of stock and I'm going to add a quart of water. And then we're going to just let this sit and cook for about 15-20 minutes, just until everything is soft. This is one of those soups that doesn't need to cook for hours. It just needs to cook long enough so that everything in the pot is nice and soft and can be pureed with my hand immersion blender. So I've added a quart of stock. Let me add a quart of water. And when you add water to a soup or anything you're cooking, you want to use cold water. It adds a freshness and crispness to the dish. So I'm going to use nice cold water, equal amounts of stock and water, and that's going to be the magic ingredient here. Perfect. And again, this is a pureed soup. So all I really need to happen here is for this to be completely cooked so that all the mushrooms are completely tender. So we're going to bring this to a boil, and then we're going to cook it for about 15 minutes at a simmer, and then we're going to turn it off, puree it, boom, we're done and ready to eat. Alright, so we're getting to the point where the soup is boiling. Let's take a quick peek at this. Oh, perfect. And we're just going to let this boil for about 5 minutes, and really all we're looking to do here is make sure that the mushrooms are completely cooked and tender, so that when we puree them, everything purees easily and it becomes nice and blended. Let me grab my spoon. Give this a little rinse, give this a little stir. This smells delicious. And you could just see the richness of the broth, the beautiful light sandy color, and that's just the combination of the stock and the mushrooms and all the vegetables and seasonings. And I would say let's give this about another 4 more minutes. And what I thought we'd do is that I thought we'd serve this with a little garlic toast, which is one of my favorite things to make. Super easy. People absolutely love it. But let me just talk to you a little bit about the garnish on this. When we serve this soup, I'm going to serve it with just a little bit of fresh parsley and a couple of nice thin slices of mushrooms. Get rid of that piece, it's not perfect. And for this part of it, you want these mushrooms to be absolutely perfect. And they're just going to float really nicely on top of your soup. And again, it's like the signature of the dish. So that if you had no idea what I was serving you, by seeing these little pieces of mushrooms floating on top, you would know exactly what you were eating. Alright, the soup is now finished cooking. It's all boiled. Let me just refill my glass a little bit, and then we're in the final stretches, the home run of this particular dish. Excellent. Let me just take a sip. Boom. Fantastic. Okay, soup is completely done. The mushrooms are tender. Now it's ready to be pureed. We're going to adjust the seasoning, and then we're going to serve it. Alright, this is my immersion blender. A couple of little tips about the immersion blender. Number one, it's plugged in. Never touch the end. There's a high and a low speed here. Low, high. Basically, because this is a hot soup, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the blender in all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to keep the blender on the bottom. I'm not going to let it come out so it can splatter. So here we go. We're going to just blend it and move it around when it's on the bottom. And you can see as you do it that everything gets finer and finer and finer. It gets more uniform and more uniform. It's an excellent, excellent pureeing tool. This, by the way, eliminates the need for me to have to take this hot liquid, put it in a blender, turn the blender on, dirty the blender, and have to clean the blender. Very, very useful, handy tool. If you don't have one, definitely recommend you go get one. Now that it's pureed, I'm going to just adjust and taste the season for final seasoning. I'm going to give it a little taste. It's going to need a little salt and pepper now. Okay, we're going to add a little more salt. And this is where you're going to taste the salt. Add a little bit more salt. Again, I love sea salt. And a little more cracked black pepper. And I'd say add about a teaspoon of salt and a half a teaspoon of pepper. Give it a stir. Give it a final little taste. Oh, fantastic. Amazing. Excellent. Perfectly seasoned. Just a teeny bit of heat from the crushed chilies. That mushroom flavor, the richness of the broth, all of it combined because it's pureed. Fantastic. Let's serve it up because I think I'm actually going to have a friend who's going to be stopping by in a little bit. I know he's going to love this. Alright, what I did before the break too is I toasted up some bread, some nice hearty bread. And I'm going to make a garlic toast, and what that means is I just rub some garlic on it, as you saw before. Those are ready to go. Let me go ahead and get a ladle.
And bring the garlic bread back into the shot.
Yeah. All right, let's take a little of the soup. Let's fill our bowl, our soup bowl. And this is a hearty soup, and this is a meal in itself. Don't kid yourself. Even though it's liquid, it is a meal in itself. All those mushrooms. And we're just going to finish this with a little fresh parsley, a couple of pieces of nice little mushroom on top. Let's grab a couple of 3 slices of this garlic toast. There we go, right there. Oh, does that look awesome? I'm ready to eat. I don't know about you. There you have it, a hearty winter mushroom soup with some garlic toast. That's a meal in itself, don't kid yourself. And here's the good, hearty, beautiful, healthy food. Easy to make, not expensive. Just down-to-earth food for down-to-earth people. Good appetite.